Today I'm going to talk about a little bit about education and where that's all leading, and the parental nightmare that's in the schools right now. And it's all started a discussion I had not long ago with some people that asked me to come and speak to them about things that were happening with sex education. They asked me to talk about what was going on in California, and because if any of you have been watching the headlines on this, it's absolutely outrageous. And they wanted to know how that would affect Utah, because as so goes California in time, so goes the nation, and Utah joins in. So I thought, okay, if I'm going to talk about this, I've got to quickly look into this and find out what's going on in Utah that maybe I don't know about. Because when it comes to sex education, years ago, I was involved in writing the law that we have right now, and I kind of watched that law really closely. But I also know about some other things that always seem to happen. And one was that in the schools right now that they can ask questions, spontaneous questions. But if you go online and look for that under sex education at the State Office of Education, you probably are not going to find it unless you just keep going till you get to the teacher's resources. And guess what's at the teacher's resources? There's the information that says, according to Utah law, teachers may respond to spontaneous student questions for the purpose of providing medically accurate data or correcting inaccurate or misleading information. Well, as you start to look at this, suddenly there is where Utah is just like California. Because those spontaneous questions can be anything the students want to ask. In this list that I found of what's going on in the state of Utah with those questions, under sex, there were 29 questions. And the rules were that teachers could not talk about sexual techniques. Now that was really interesting because, like, for example, for that, one of the questions is how to put on a condom. And the teacher says, I can't answer that. That's a technique question. You'll have to look at the instructions that come with the condoms to find out for yourself. But then I went on to read things, and I could not believe they couldn't answer that question, but they could answer the most unbelievable questions, things that I cannot talk to you about here today, would never. I testified on this before the state school board and said, I can't tell you what's on your website for your questions. I can't talk about that. It was so horrible. In fact, when I looked on there were things on there I'd never heard of. And when I asked my husband what that meant, he wouldn't tell me. It was too embarrassing for us to talk about it between the two of us. That's how bad this is. And it does talk about techniques. Any deviant sexual practice you can think of was on there. They asked questions about, they wanted to know about what kind of sex do homosexuals practice. But they asked things way beyond that, and they made it sound normal. Because one of the questions was, well, really, what is having sex? What does that mean? And then they go on to describe things that you cannot believe. Describe it. Tell the students what to do and how to do it, what it means. And I couldn't believe it. And I was embarrassed that I had found this. I was embarrassed that I was reading this. If I don't read this, how am I going to go tell people about it? How are we going to do something about it? There wasn't anything in all my research about what was going on in California that was any worse than what I found on the website that teachers can and are talking to children about. It was horrible. I'm going to just go back. Here's like the first 12 questions, and that's all you get to see. Because I'm not going to, if any parent who is interested in this, they need to know, you can go on the website. And that's Utah Education, the State Office of Education website, and just look under teachers' resources. Along with all of this, there was part of this was this group agreement, the guidelines, called the ROPES activity. And it's important to know that what ROPES is, because the children discuss this and they make an agreement with the teacher. And ROPES, as you can see, is spelled out there. R stands for respect, and O, open-mindedness and opportunity. P for participating in other things. E for empathy and education. But look at S. S says, said here stays here. So whatever they talk about in that class stays there. You don't go home and tell your parents. So nobody knows about these terrible, terrible questions and the discussions that go on. Those 29 questions that I found, those were the most frequently asked questions. There was a lot more than that, beyond anything you would ever, ever, ever want your children to hear. And remember, these parents are signing for their child to be in that class. Utah is an opt-in state. That's part of our sex education laws. And so the parents look at the curriculum and say, oh, this looks okay to me because we're abstinence-based. So I'm going to sign up. 90% of the parents in the state of Utah sign to have their children in those classes. And I bet you not one of them knows the filth that's being discussed in that class. So don't sign up to it. If your children go to public school, don't let this happen. I sent letters right away to legislators, to the state school board, to the superintendent. She was, within an hour, she'd contacted me, and we talked back and forth for several days about this and how filthy it was and how awful it was. And I told her, I said, you need to make sure that every parent, before they sign that paper, gets a list of these questions. We could shut this down in a hurry. So as they're asking all these questions, the curiosity of the children is unbelievable. And many young people are deciding that they no longer want to live as the biological sex that they were assigned at birth. So this is a question that they ask. And what is this causing? Well, they surround themselves with other young people who may be feeling the same way and support each other in their unhealthy feelings that can lead to decisions to attempt to transition to the opposite sex. Tragically, these little children as young as 8 are being convinced that they are transgender, and then they start putting pressure on their parents to let them transition, and they think this is normal. According to the American College of Pediatricians, puberty blockers arrest and decrease bone growth and prevent the sex steroids that are dependent on the organization and maturation, and the things that the brain and inhibit fertility. Endocrinologist Michael Laidlaw said that because of the puberty blockers, adolescents' bones are not as strong as they would be if they had normal development. Hormone-blocking drugs used on young boys have been reported to cause the development of their genitalia to be arrested, so that when they reach their late teens, their genitalia is the equivalent of a 9-year-old boy, along with the loss of sexual sensation, and they're sterile. So what do we have? 19 years old, and they're basically a eunuch. Other extreme actions are girls as young as 12 or 13 being subjected to mastectomies. The concept of changing one's biological sex is, of course, nonsense, as sex is determined by unalterable chromosomes. An individual cannot change his hormone levels or undergo surgery, or they can change and undergo surgery to better imitate the opposite sex, but a male on the day of his conception will remain a male on the day of his death. And by contrast, gender identity is psychological. Transgenderism has shaken the foundation of all we know to be true. Scientific knowledge is rejected, medical practice co-opted in service of a new reality, that gender is independent of sex, that male and female of any age, even young children, are entitled to their own transgender self-identification based on their feelings, that literally every individual and every segment of society must bow to their chosen identity at the risk of losing reputation, livelihood, and even freedom itself. Transgender activists in the medical profession support legislative prohibitions on what they call conversion therapy. This means that psychiatrists and other psychotherapists are banned from even exploring with the patient the underlying psychological basis for their dysphoria. In other words, it stops talk therapy. That only therapy they can get is therapy that affirms their feelings. And if their parents are taking the children in, I mean, we're talking 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds. When you have a little girl who decides she's a boy, she's going to go to that therapist. When that therapist says, well, how do you feel? Who do you think you are? They're going to say, I think I'm a girl or a boy. And that's what they're going to go with. So I want to share something here. And actually, I've been timing myself, so I don't know what you told them, but I got it right here. Anyway, because I got to finish this part. Well, if you want to know this, we'll ask. Anyway, what we have here is the University of Utah. These things I'm talking to you about right now are happening at the University of Utah. And what I have here is not my opinion. I just copy and pasted the whole from their website. And they say, this is what the University of Utah offers. We offer a comprehensive clinic for transgender, non-binary, intersex, and non-conforming youth, as well as youth questioning their gender, care for physical, mental, and emotional health. And then they talk about what they have there at the clinic and what you can expect. Their services, and these two doctors are there at the University of Utah. Services, puberty blockers, gender-affirming hormones, behavioral health, nutrition, wellness, family planning. And then, of course, they have a team of different kinds of doctors. And then when can I start my hormones? Well, they talk about, they want to know about your overall health, and they'll have you start coming in. When can I have surgery? Well, they talk about the kind of surgery. They want you to wait at least 10 months after they start the gender the cross-sex hormones and the puberty blockers. The name of this clinic is the GEMS Clinic, Adolescent Gender Management and Support Clinic. And what can you expect on your first appointment? They talk about that they're going to give you the blood tests and answer your questions, and you and your parents will have to sign the consent form. And then get permission they want to contact your mental health therapist that's going to affirm, because that's all they'll be allowed to do if conversion therapy passes. The second appointment, they continue to get to know about you, talk about the risks, and let you know that you may be sterile when this is over, and talk about your support network. Then on the third appointment, they review all this, create the plan, and on the third appointment is when they start the puberty blockers and the hormone therapy. What to expect on your fourth appointment is just to go on and tell you that they'll continue to monitor as you go. Again, each time talking about the importance of having a mental health therapist that's only going to affirm. The DSM-5 states that among females who identify during their childhood as male, the rate of non-persistence, those who change their mind, may be as high as 88%, and for males may be as high as 97.8%. These are the ones who change their mind if they don't have the puberty blockers. And we ask, how can doctors who pledge to do no harm do these things to the children? And what happens when the children change their mind? What do they do? Where do they go? What are they supposed to do with themselves? And how about their emotional and physical health? Why would any parent allow such a horrible thing to be done to their child? Well, you know what the reason that is? It's about suicide. Because these parents are told if they don't let their children transgender, those children are going to commit suicide, which is ridiculous. Because what is actually true is the opposite of this. Because we have these studies out of Sweden that's been doing this for a long time, and guess what? Based on those studies, if the children go through these puberty blockers and the surgery, when they come out of this, 17, 18, 19, on into their young adults, guess what? The suicide rates are 19 times higher. So what they're really doing is programming their children for suicide. The Vatican issued an official document, rejecting the idea that people can choose or change their gender. Male and female, he created them, said the Pope. And then President Dallin Oaks said, a year ago at conference, he said, gender is eternal. Before we were born on this earth, we all lived as male or female spirits in the presence of God. And then just last Saturday in the women's meetings, he said, our walk must be considerate of children who are uncertain about their sexual orientation, but it discourages premature labeling because in most children, such uncertainty decreases significantly over the time. Obviously, he read what we just talked about, that most of them are going to change. Now, what can you do? I need time to tell them what they can do. Right? Each of you or families were given this little booklet. You have to read it. It cost me lots of money. I ordered enough of these for you today and for others and for all the legislators, and it cost me over $1,000. So, read it. If you're not going to read it, just give it back. But read it and then share it, because everything I just talked to you about today is in this little booklet. It's an easy read. In fact, it's so interesting, you won't want to put it down. And if you want to buy more, you can look on our website. In fact, our brochure is here on the back is the website. Also, you have this paper in front of you that I didn't put Eagle Forum on. But we need you to do something in the next few days before Tuesday. This is so important. Read this and just follow the instructions. Because at the bottom it says you need to go online and sign a petition. And then you need to send, just a paragraph or so. The information's here about what I've been talking about and why we do not want a ban on conversion therapy in the state of Utah. Because the unelected licensing board is just about to pass that ban. And up until Tuesday, they're taking input. The elected legislature rejected it during the legislative session. And now the unelected board is going around the legislature. So please, now, just quickly, I need to tell you, I need your help. I need your help, please. A couple of years ago, I stood up here and said again, I need your help. I need a secretary. Well, I got one. She's sitting right there. She was here that day, Raina Williams. But with Raina came all of his help. Her husband, Bruce, he came too. He's now one of our chapter presidents. And guess what? Last year, he was the chairman of our convention, our yearly convention. And guess what? This year, he's the chairman of our yearly convention. He doesn't know that, but he does now. Along with Bruce came their darling daughters, Elena and Rachel, who are at the legislature, who went to D.C. with us, went lobbying to all the congressmen. And then there's Brian. Brian does all kinds of things, like help his dad. and I got a whole family. But I need more families, and I need people. Please, this is not an meet, eat, and retreat event here today. Rod told you need to go out and do something. I'm here to tell you need to go out and do something, and what that something is help us and anybody else who's willing to go to the legislature. Do you know that in the last almost 3 weeks, I have not been to bed at night, not one night before 3 o'clock in the morning. That is how busy we are. Because we're not only dealing with this issue with conversion therapy, and we're trying to get a law passed to stop the mutilating these little children. Why can they give children puberty blockers and do surgery on them, but they can't drink until they're 21? They can have their body mutilated. And we need your help on this. We also have to deal with the ERA. That's back, and they want Utah to be the 38th state. Vaping, marijuana. Our children are dying from that. Religious liberty. We are in so much trouble, and that's going to be this year too. And protecting the unborn. We're going to have a great bill this year at the legislature. It's a bill that Pat Nix, clear back in the days that she was in the land, she's asleep. Pat, we're talking about you. Okay. 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, Pat had the courage to have a bill when she was in the legislature that life begins at conception. And that bill passed. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. It got cert. That never happens. It shouldn't have happened, but it happened. And of course, things happened, and it didn't make it through the Supreme Court. But we're going to do Pat's bill again this year. In fact, I resurrected it, and that's the bill we're doing. We're going to put a trigger on it because that's the only way we can get it passed, but we're going to pass it again. All of those things, we need your help. So please, Raina's sitting right over there. Raise your hand, Raina. She'll take your name, your phone number. She'll bug you. Everybody in this room's got to do something. Either come and help us or donate money to Dave, but those are your two choices. So thank you very much, and please, please, please help us.